People never notice anything. They walk by, lost in their own worlds, oblivious to the stories unfolding around them. Holden Caulfield, a name synonymous with teenage angst, rebellion, and that feeling of being completely lost. He's the embodiment of youthful discontent, a symbol of the struggle to find one's place in a world that often feels alien and unwelcoming. We meet Holden as he's getting the boot from yet another prestigious school, Pensy Prep. It's not the first time, and it likely won't be the last. His academic journey is a series of starts and stops, a reflection of his internal turmoil. He's fed up with the phonies, the rules, the whole damn system. The hypocrisy he sees in the adult world is suffocating, and he feels trapped in a cycle he can't escape. So what does he do? He runs. Not literally, of course. He decides to leave behind the confines of Pensy Prep and the expectations of his family. Holden decides to escape to New York City for a few days. The city represents a chance for freedom, a break from the monotony and the pressures that weigh him down. A few days of freedom before facing the music back home. He imagines the city as a place where he can lose himself, where he can be anonymous and free from judgment. Little does he know, this impulsive decision will take him on a roller coaster of emotions and experiences that will force him to confront his deepest fears and insecurities. The city, with all its chaos and vibrancy, becomes a mirror reflecting his inner struggles. New York City, the city that never sleeps. It's a place of endless possibilities, where dreams are made and broken in the blink of an eye. A place where everyone supposedly finds themselves. But for Holden, it becomes a labyrinth of confusion and disillusionment. But for Holden, it becomes a playground of disillusionment. The city, with its bright lights and constant motion, only amplifies his sense of isolation. He wanders from one encounter to the next, desperately seeking connection but finding only disappointment. Each person he meets, each conversation he has, leaves him feeling more alone than before. Each interaction, each experience pushes him further down the rabbit hole of his own alienation. The city that never sleeps becomes a backdrop for his sleepless nights, filled with thoughts that won't let him rest. Holden Caulfield is a walking contradiction. He craves connection yet pushes people away. He longs for meaningful relationships but is terrified of the vulnerability they require. He yearns for authenticity but sees hypocrisy everywhere. In the bustling streets of 1950s New York, he feels like an outsider, constantly observing but never truly participating. His weapon of choice? That loaded word phony. It's his way of labeling the insincerity he perceives in the world around him. To Holden, phony isn't just a word, it's a way of life for most adults. He sees their interactions as shallow and their intentions as self-serving. He sees it in their smiles, their conversations, their very existence. Every forced laugh and insincere compliment only deepens his disdain. This cynical lens colors his perception of everyone and everything, making it almost impossible for him to form genuine connections. He feels isolated, trapped in a world that doesn't understand him. But Holden's obsession with phoniness isn't just about others. It's a reflection of his own inner turmoil. He grapples with his own inconsistencies and fears. He's struggling to reconcile the loss of his own innocence with the expectations of the adult world. The death of his younger brother Allie haunts him, a constant reminder of purity lost. He sees hypocrisy in himself, in his own thoughts and actions. This self-awareness only adds to his frustration and sense of alienation. This internal conflict fuels his anger, his alienation, and his desperate need to protect what little innocence he believes is left in the world. He becomes a guardian of sorts, trying to shield the vulnerable from the harsh realities he perceives. In the midst of Holden's cynicism, two figures stand out as beacons of light: his deceased younger brother Allie and his little sister Phoebe. Allie, who died of leukemia a few years before, represents innocence lost. He was everything Holden believes is good and pure in the world. Allie's death shattered Holden, leaving him grappling with grief, guilt, and a profound sense of loss. Phoebe, on the other hand, represents the innocence Holden desperately wants to protect. She's smart, quirky, and full of life. She challenges Holden, calls him out on his BS, and reminds him of the beauty that still exists in the world. Their relationship is one of the few genuine connections Holden has left. It's through Phoebe that we see glimpses of Holden's vulnerability, his capacity for love, and his deep yearning for connection. Holden's fantasy of being the catcher in the rye is perhaps one of the most iconic and enduring images in American literature. He envisions himself standing on the edge of a field, catching children before they fall off a cliff. This cliff represents the loss of innocence, the harsh realities of the adult world. This fantasy encapsulates Holden's deep-seated fear of change and his desire to protect the innocence he sees in children like Phoebe. He wants to freeze time, to shield them from the pain and disillusionment that he believes inevitably comes with growing up. Section 5. Lost in New York, Holden's search for connection. Holden's journey through New York City is a whirlwind of fleeting encounters, awkward interactions, and missed connections. The bustling streets and vibrant nightlife only amplify his sense of isolation as he navigates through the city, searching for a meaningful bond. He goes on dates, meets up with old classmates, even hires a prostitute. Each attempt to connect is a desperate grasp at finding someone who can understand his inner turmoil. But each experience leaves him feeling emptier and more alone. The city, with all its opportunities for connection, becomes a labyrinth of loneliness for Holden. He desperately wants to connect with someone, anyone, who understands him. His yearning for a genuine human connection is palpable yet elusive. But his cynicism, his fear of vulnerability, and his inability to cope with his own emotions sabotage any chance of genuine connection. His internal struggles create barriers that prevent him from opening up to others. His interactions with adults are particularly fraught. He finds it difficult to relate to them, often feeling misunderstood and judged. He sees them as phony, superficial, and obsessed with appearances. This perception only deepens his sense of alienation. He rebels against their hypocrisy, their rules, and their expectations, further isolating himself from any potential support system. His rebellion is both a cry for help and a declaration of independence. Holden's journey through New York is a painful reminder of the isolation and loneliness that can accompany adolescence, especially when coupled with unaddressed trauma and grief. His story is a poignant exploration of the human need for connection and the barriers that can stand in the way. Section 6. Breaking down the price of unresolved grief and alienation. As Holden's journey progresses, his mental state deteriorates. He becomes increasingly erratic, paranoid, and detached from reality. His thoughts spiral out of control as he grapples with unresolved grief over Allie's death, his own burgeoning sexuality, and the overwhelming pressure to conform to a world he finds meaningless. The line between what's real and what's imagined blurs. The novel culminates in a mental breakdown. Holden, exhausted and emotionally spent, collapses. The final scenes take place in an institution where he recounts his experiences from a place of emotional distance. While the ending is left open to interpretation, it's clear that Holden is profoundly affected by his experiences and is beginning to confront the root of his pain. Section 7. The Catcher's Legacy, a timeless exploration of teenage angst. The Catcher in the Rye is more than just a story, it's a cultural phenomenon. It's a raw, unflinching portrayal of adolescence, capturing the confusion, the angst, and the overwhelming sense of alienation that many teenagers experience. Holden Caulfield, with all his flaws and contradictions, has become an iconic literary figure, a symbol of teenage rebellion and the search for identity. The novel's themes of alienation, identity, loss of innocence, and the hypocrisy of the adult world continue to resonate with readers of all ages, but especially with young adults navigating the choppy waters of adolescence. Holden's voice, cynical and vulnerable all at once, gives voice to the unspoken thoughts and feelings of a generation grappling with the pressures of growing up. Section 8. Holden Caulfield's enduring impact, a mirror for generations. Holden Caulfield is not a hero. He's not even necessarily a likable character. He's flawed, he's cynical, he's often downright frustrating. But that's precisely what makes him so relatable. He's a reflection of our own teenage selves, our own struggles with identity, our own moments of rebellion and disillusionment. Holden's story continues to resonate with readers because it acknowledges the pain and confusion of adolescence. It doesn't offer easy answers or tidy resolutions. Instead, it presents a raw, unflinching look at the challenges of growing up, the complexities of human relationships, and the search for meaning in a world that often feels meaningless.